They didn't tell him that this began decades before. In April 2009, he went under a liver transplant, and when his doctors took out his liver, they found spots on the peritoneum, and that's the lining. It was every place. The thin membrane that surrounds the organ. In addition, there were tumors throughout his liver, which meant he would likely had cancer everywhere. Of course, he had cancer everywhere. By July of 2011, his cancer spread to his bones and other parts of his body, and everybody agreed there was no hope. And then he died October 5th, 2011. But the consensus was, and is today, except for people who have gone through the analysis that I've gone through, nobody's made a criticism of what I've done. It's been out since November of 2011. It's very well read. The overall consensus was and still is that Jobs acted selfishly, stupidly, and irresponsibly by not having his surgery done. It's impossible for that to have been the case, based upon standard natural history and understanding of how cancer grows and spreads. All right, remember, just to recap for you, cancer was first seen on the CAT scan in October of 2003 at age 48. Delayed surgery for 9 months. He had definitive surgery at age 49. That interval, I don't know how anybody could come to that conclusion, was thought to be a reckless decision to delay, but in truth, based upon the calculations, his cancer began at age 24 and it spread by age 27. All right, how did Jobs get cancer as a teenager or a young adult in his 20s? Well, Jobs worked in Silicon Valley in the computer industry. Summer of his freshman year out of high school in Los Altos, California, Jobs called Bill Hewlett of Hewlett-Packard. And on the phone, he talked to him, he said, and Packard, he said, and he answered and chatted with me for about 20 minutes. He got me the parts, but he also got me a job in a plant where they made frequency counters. He started working in the computer industry when he was 14, 15 years old. It was exposed to all kinds of carcinogens. The regulation in Silicon Valley and the electronics industry is, even today, it's better today, but back then it was almost no regulation at all. I mean, people didn't even think about these things that they were working with in electronics to be in any way toxic. Yet these days, and to some extent back then, we knew that these chemicals that they were working with, the organic and the inorganic materials, initiated and also caused the progression of cancer. Cadmium and lead, for example. We know from scientific research, articles have been published, that lead will cause islet cell non-endocrine pancreatic cancer, just like Jobs had. There's discussions in his book, this biography, that talk about Jobs soldering computers together, and solder is made of lead. And I can imagine from my few experiences soldering that he inhaled that without any concern at all. All kinds of metals are found in personal computers, aluminum and arsenic and cadmium and cobalt, all kinds of toxic cancer-causing chemicals. I believe that Steve Jobs was exposed to cancer-causing chemicals as a teenager and a young adult. I know he was. It's not a belief. Everybody knows this. And as a result of that kind of exposure, he had injury to his cells. One cell led the way. That's a cell in the pancreas. That's when he started cancer. He was about 24 years old, maybe younger. And that cancer, as you would expect, went through the veins, spread to the rest of his body by the time he was 27. Let's get to another issue of Jobs. Throughout his whole life, Jobs ate a healthy diet, and he was described as an extremely healthy person. Throughout his life, he was considered prickly, whip-thin vegetarian. That's a quote from the book. He was described as looking rather like a boxer, aggressive, elusive, graceful, and like an elegant jungle cat ready to spring at its prey. Anybody that ever saw Jobs, any pictures you ever saw of Jobs, anybody who knew Jobs, always marveled at his excellent health. I wonder if they thought about that being related to his vegetarian diet. Well, when he got sick and died, there was a whole other story told. Thanks to his co-founder at Apple, Steve Wozniak. Steve Wozniak, every picture I've been seeing, he's very overweight or obese. Yet, and this was fodder for people who like to hear good news about their bad habits, Yet Steve Jobs was obviously Wozniak was obviously overweight. He's 4 years, was 4 years older than Jobs, and still alive. Ate at Denny's, and his favorite foods were pizzas and burgers. So what did the public say when Steve Jobs died of pancreatic cancer? See, it doesn't matter what you eat. In fact, if you're a vegetarian, you're likely to get pancreatic cancer and die. Yeah, that was the response. And don't kid yourself. I'm sure you heard that, particularly if you eat a healthy diet yourself. I'm sure one of your friends or relatives came up to you and said, see, doesn't do you any good to eat a healthy diet. Look what happened to Steve Jobs. That's a paradox, apparent paradox. But, you know, what happened to Steve Jobs was just like getting struck by lightning or, walking out in the street and get hit by a car. He happened to get exposed to these very toxic metals, and because of bad luck, the wrath of God, genetics, or whatever you want to say, in his case, those toxic metals or organic materials that are poisonous caused his pancreatic cells to become deranged, and thus the cancer started. Just bad luck.